As I'm sure we all know, in the past couple decades, Canada's emerged as a leader in brain research. We've been able to deliver kind of breakthrough research in the areas of structural neuroscience, stroke recovery, and neurodegeneration, being consistently ranked as one of kind of the top nations in terms of delivering kind of high quality publications. Despite this, a number of challenges currently exist, as I'm sure many of our PIs as well as trainees are aware. There's a very kind of dismal outlook on in terms of kind of getting kind of increased grant funding for neuroscience research, as well as challenges in dealing with incorporating Indigenous perspectives and a competitive and often kind of a difficult environment for trainees to stay in Canada. In light of this, a number of kind of nonprofits and other businesses within Canada have emerged as leaders in rethinking what neuroscience research might look like. Today, we're joined by Dr. Jenny Young, Executive Director for the Canadian Brain Research Strategy, a group that spans across Canada and multiple stakeholders you see in front of you, that serves the kind of looks to reimagine what brain health research might be like in Canada. Dr. Young received her PhD from the University of Alberta in neuroscience, following which she spent 14 years at MIT as a postdoc and then scientific chief of staff for first Nobel laureate Sunezumo Tonigawa, and then PCOER director Li Huizai. Her research has spanned the fields of learning and memory, as well as Alzheimer's disease, leading to numerous publications in top-ranking peer-reviewed journals, including Science, Neuron, Cell, and Nature. In 2021, Dr. Young joined the Canadian Brain Research Strategy, hoping to lead a new initiative in creating this kind of transformational national brain kind of initiative in Canada. Together with a variety of stakeholders, including those shown kind of on the screen, in both academia, nonprofit, government, and Indigenous stakeholders, Dr. Young and the CBRS work to kind of create a new transformational and multi-collaborative strategy for what neuroscience research can look like. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Young.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Nathaniel. So just let me move something really quickly here. Jeez. All right, so thank you for this exciting opportunity. I'm really honored to be here today with all of you who share a passion for science and policy. It's really individuals like yourself who are actively involved, combined with a united collective voice that can guarantee, or that can generate, I wish it would guarantee, generate tremendous power to influence policy for research funding in Canada. So today I'm going to tell you about the National Research Strategy for Brain and Mental Health that we've been developing at CBRS. The path we took to develop this strategy, how we fit into the larger brain research ecosystem, and our path forward. So the aim is for me to give a 35-minute talk. It's going to be a really broad overview and touch on a lot of things because I want to leave a lot of time for questions and to look into more details. So before I get started, I wanted to kind of get a sense of who's in the audience here. So how many graduate students or undergraduate students do we have here? Can we raise your, amazing, wonderful. And do we have any research associates or research staff here? Oh, thank you, wonderful. And PIs, of course, whom I know, thank you. So this is really fantastic because I think it's an important aspect of our strategy that we are trying to build up the whole ecosystem and to really try to strengthen the amazing research that we have across the country. So really at the core of our strategy is the conviction that we need to foster better neurological and mental well-being for all Canadians. And we do this by leveraging our strengths to drive progress in brain and mental health research across the country. So we're making the argument to government that it's crucial to Canada's success and well-being that we invest in brain research. And we've brought together key stakeholders across many sectors in neuroscience and mental health research to develop this strategy together. And we think that the time for our Brain Initiative for Canada is now. So first, who are we? Our advisory leadership includes the heads of 40 neuroscience and mental health research institutes across the country. We have early and mid-career researcher leaders, Indigenous knowledge holders group, and patient representatives through partnership with Neurological Health Charities Canada. And I lead the secretariat, which is really just to try and put this together. So the thing is, though, in addition to this advisory leadership, we actually have a lot more, much larger coalition of organizations behind us, and professional associations of let me see if I can get my mouse over here. There we go. Professional associations of neuroscientists, of course, but also neurologists. So this represents 7 neurological specialties. We have different networks of researchers focused on specific research questions like dementia, neurodevelopment, brain injury. We have many different, okay, I'm going to stop using the mouse. We have many different organizations representing patients and people with lived experience of brain conditions. And we have more than 30 research funding organizations. That includes federal funding agencies like CIHR, NSHRC, National Research Council. There are provincial entities as well. And then there's a whole bunch of nonprofits and health charities and even private foundations. And we have, we're bringing industry partners on board as well. So with all of these groups together, what we see is the need for a coordinated approach to brain and mental health research. And they're with us advocating for Brain Initiative for Canada. Oh, somebody. Okay. I'm just letting people in if they can join Zoom.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So some of you might not be familiar with the term Brain Initiative. A lot of countries have invested in these focused research programs in neuroscience. So some of them are listed here. Now, unfortunately for Canada, even though we've represented Canada, for example, these are the other countries in the International Brain Initiative, we have never received funding for our own Brain Initiative. And so, but a lot of countries have invested in, and the ones on the side here are building towards, put that here, are building towards their own initiatives too. Sorry, I'm going to disable the waiting room if that's all right.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay. Let me just do that really quickly. All right. So the thing is, we know that Canada is capable of investing in targeted ecosystem building endeavors when they want to. For example, our government has invested in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biomanufacturing. And basically, we're telling them, if we want to continue investing in this targeted way, the next area should be brain research. And here's the strategy, and we built it with all of these different stakeholders. So what does a Canadian brain research strategy look like? So these are the key points that came out of a workshop held with early career researchers in fall of 2020 before I joined, so I take zero credit for this work. But this framework for our strategy came from these early career researchers from across the country. There were 2 workshops. They were nominated by our research leaders and really balanced across different fields of study. But the principles of what we're trying to build is that we really want to be able to build up research across the country. So opposed to the other brain initiatives around the world, where it's just more grants that went pretty much to the usual labs, and we do need more funding for grants. We really, it was the aim to really be able to coordinate the ecosystem better across all of these centers across the country, and to also see the future of brain research, not just in Canada, but really where globally it's headed is more towards collaboration, transdisciplinary approaches, and building on open science efforts. And it happens that these are strengths in Canada. And so in this workshop, it really became clear, and even just looking at the research being done at U Ottawa, we have leaders in so many different fields of brain and mental health. To cherry pick one certain area to build on would really be a disservice. And it's really how we approach brain research in Canada that's our strength. And so we arrived on these starting priorities in gray, which are ways to concretely advance and create a collaborative transdisciplinary open ecosystem for brain research. And so we really spent the first year and a half or so carrying out these stakeholder consultations to shape our national strategy through our leaders and word of mouth. We recruited researchers from across the country, and I see some of you here today, to discuss key challenges and needs in these areas. So we ran these researcher roundtables, which were virtual discussions with these whiteboards. We consulted with people with lived experience and found that they were also very much aligned and understood the importance of a collaborative transdisciplinary open brain research ecosystem. This data is just from our lived experience sessions, where we asked them what they thought about these 6 priority areas. And it was really interesting that they thought each was important in different ways, because we were prepared not to hold focus groups on all 6. But the gist of this is that that we have their support as well, and they see this as the future of brain research in Canada and how it will be most impactful for them. In a similar manner, we found really strong alignment with our other key stakeholder group, which is Indigenous Perspectives. There's a strong alignment for this collaborative transdisciplinary open approach, because many Indigenous knowledge systems look at brain health with a holistic view, which is what we as scientists are now realizing, that we can't just look at one specific aspect of brain function. We really need to be able to bring in these larger collaborative approaches. So the other major stakeholder group that we brought in to, I think, is your computer frozen? Okay. The other big group of stakeholders we brought in are funding organizations, so not just granting bodies, but industry partners, and also private foundations that sometimes just fund research directly. And because we're not focused on a specific scientific question or disease area, this is how we're able to bring all of these different organizations together. And the fact that they are very strongly aligned with our strategic priorities. So we asked them what are their current programs, planned programs, and their interest in funding different ways of doing research. And for example, in open science, 12 of the organizations who answered our survey already have programs in open science. 2 were planned, and another 3 were interested to learn more. Now, the fact that these priorities are very strongly aligned in retrospect isn't a surprise. It's why they're areas of strength in Canada. But this also represents 2 really important things. One is the fact that there are shared needs, because, for example, a lot of groups have been funding platform science, so virtual or physical platforms to enable sharing of resources, data, techniques, etc. But they're not connected with each other, and they are not able to be as accessible and sustainable. And it shouldn't be up to the individual organizations to make sure that happens, because that would take away from their specific grant funding, and we don't want that. So they're together with us asking for a coordinated ecosystem, because this is the future of brain research that many people see but aren't able to take part in right now. The other aspect that this graph represents is the fact that because they're so strongly aligned, we can start making progress in these areas now. And so what we've done is to hold a focus meeting with all these funders. Yes. Just so that like it looks like the gray show, is that going on top of all the red, or is it complementing the red? It's complement, yeah. So out of the 19 for open science, for example, only one group that answered the survey is not doing anything in open science and have no plans or interest. Yeah, and this we've done this from the first year when we just had our first roundtable in 2020, and it's been strongly aligned like this every year. Yeah, feel free to jump in with questions also. To be another point I should point out is, to be clear, we don't want our funders to fund our BRAIN initiative because it's bigger than what any one organization can do. And that's why they're in it with us, to ask for government to allow us to be coordinated and to work together more. And part of what we're doing now already is, because there's such strong alignment on these priorities, we can create this forum for the funders to come together now and exchange best practices, to share their challenges, and to see how they can start making their funding programs more coordinated and improve already. And the example I'll use is around our Indigenous initiatives. That came out of our diversity and team science meeting, where funders recognize that they want to support more Indigenous-led research and research with Indigenous communities, but a lot of times there's capacity issues with the communities that they're trying to approach, and also in terms of building those relationships and the resources that it takes. And so we held a meeting with all our different funders, and these were some of the major discussion themes, both to build the capacity of Indigenous-led research and Indigenous scholars, and also some of the key considerations for engagement so that they can try and work together on a funding program. And so leading up to this, we had carried out consultations with Indigenous community members, with Indigenous health organizations, Indigenous scholars and researchers that work with Indigenous communities. This was work led by Andrew Manitowobi. And what we did then was to bring everyone together in this workshop that we held in January, to work together to think about how we could collaborate on research better in the future. And the idea then is to now pilot a research project in Andrew's community. He lives on Withlacoochee and ceded territory on Manitoulin Island. And so this is just an example of how we're able to bring everyone together to work on specific projects to overall advance a collaborative, transdisciplinary, open ecosystem. And it also shows government how we're able to work together already, because that's one of their big mandates, is to try and get all of these different funding organizations, even within federal government, to be able to work better. So this is a kind of an overview of our logic model. Basically, we want to bring together all of these different stakeholders, because unfortunately, we know that if it's just the scientists, government isn't going to listen. But by bringing everyone together, by finding our commonalities really, and to activate everybody to work together, we can raise this united voice. And so we've been building what is the national strategy together, and we hope that it will lead to a BRAIN research initiative for Canada, but at the same time, we're already able to get everyone working together and make advances now. And the idea is that if we actually get funded, people are already working together, we have that network in place, and it will be a successful initiative. So that's to kind of summarize all of the consultations that we've carried out. What we're really looking for is to build this unifying framework that can align and coordinate research efforts across the country. And what it distills down to is a need for stable, flexible, long-term funding. And by flexible, I mean non-grant specific funding. And that's because in Canada, our grants are too small that we cannot support research staff. And there are not enough positions for all the talented, incredibly talented graduates that we are turning out, because not everybody can or wants to be a PI. And so having this stable, long-term, flexible funding is a way that would build up research across all research centers in Canada, and would really build up our ecosystem. And these are all things that government says that they want, but they don't know how research works. So the way I've been explaining it to, for example, the elected officials, our PIs are kind of like the MPs and the elected officials. And everybody else, that's the bureaucrats working in government, the the strategy, the policy analysts, the program managers, we don't have funding to support that right now. It's not a tenable career. And when they hear that, they're very shocked because they know how important they are within government. And from what we hear from scientists, this is a really big gap that is not addressed by funding right now. And if our government says they want to build an ecosystem and they say they want to invest in talent and research, which is how they framed the AI and quantum strategies, this is how they could do it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're working with everybody else in the ecosystem though. So for example, we were on a panel with these other folks, not Canadian Neurological Sciences Federation, but with Brain Canada, NHCC, and CAN organized this at the last conference to really think about how we can work together to advocate for research. And that's because unfortunately right now, research is so far down on the agenda, never mind brain research. And so we really need to raise awareness that we need to fund research now and then give them an array of options. And so we've come up with this joint advocacy statement just to make the point that investing in brain research is important. The other way that we've been working with other organizations, I'll talk about this panel a little bit more in depth later, but the highlight is that we had this panel at the Canadian Science Policy Conference, and we had the head of a funding organization that focuses on aging and Kids Brain Health Network that looks at neurodevelopmental research. And they were both in competition in the federal, for federal funds in the Strategic Science Fund at that time, but they appeared on our panel together. Because the thing is, funding their individual work and the research that they support is very important, but at the same time, we need this coordinated approach because we have to understand the brain throughout the lifespan. And we can only do that if we can build this collaborative, transdisciplinary, open ecosystem where people can work together. And the other aspect of research funding that we're trying to support is by working with other advocacy groups, such as Research Canada, U15, Universities Canada, Health Charities Coalition of Canada. These groups and others have actually now formed a super group of called the Coalition for Canadian Research, where they are all advocating for doubling of tri-agency funding. And that's because we really need to just present government with as many options as possible. It's not fund this brain initiative and don't put more money in grants. We don't know all of the factors at play with their decision making, so we need to give them every option to invest in brain research. So we supported all of those organizations in brain that were competing in the Strategic Science Fund. We support these groups to try and get more funding through tri-agency. And if they want to continue investing in a targeted field, we think it should be brain, and we're creating that national strategy. So just to give you an example, it's really important how we're all of these different groups together. And now I'm going to segue into kind of some of the advocacy efforts that we've been taking. So by bringing together all of these groups, I think it's stuck. All right. Sorry. So bringing everyone to this group in the last year or so, we've switched from that initial consultation phase to outreach more in government and working on a policy level. And so I'll tell you a little bit about those efforts. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Science and Research Parliamentary Committee. That's basically how government works. There's almost 300 MPs or so, and they can't all know everything on every topic that government needs to decide on. So they form these committees of specialized topics. And then they study, for example, this one, everything related to science and research. And it's made out of MPs across all political parties. And then they call in witnesses, and then they write up a report, they present it to the House of Commons. And that's how all the MPs get informed. So they had a study on moonshot programs, so large, ambitious research and development programs to tackle the biggest societal issues. And it's kind of modeled on the cancer moonshot. But again, in the US, with the scale of funding that they have, they can kind of use a brute force approach and just put a lot of money in and fund a lot of different people, mostly the same players, and hope that something big comes out of it. But we don't have that scale of investment in Canada. And so we were arguing that we need a moonshot for brain in Canada, but done in a slightly different way. But what was really remarkable wasn't so much that I had the opportunity up here, but that we rallied 15 other organizations, and this was 2 weeks before Christmas, when I got the invitation to submit briefs in support for a brain moonshot in Canada from all of these organizations. And you can see some of them are very big, like Heart and Stroke Foundation. And actually, at first, they didn't have time. They didn't think they'd have time to put one in. And they asked us to write a brief and put their logo on it. But in the end, they wrote their own brief because we need to highlight the importance of research. That was the top message in the brief, is understanding the brain is the most critical issue facing Canadians today. And then to say stroke impacts this number of people. And for the mental health group to say mental health affects this number of people, and here's what we're doing. But the bottom line is that we need to invest in research to make a difference in the health of Canadians, and we need a coordinated national approach to do this. And so, from all of these different groups, there were 28 briefs in this study that were submitted, and some are in space exploration, and some are in clean energy or climate change, and 16 were on brain. And so it really made a strong impact, the fact that we're able to bring all of these people together, and all of them, despite working in different areas. And for example, the mental health group, they're funding more research led by communities and services delivery, but they still know we need to make those discoveries with research if we're going to find new cures and treatments. And so it's kind of speaking on this level to get our politicians to understand, because unfortunately, like most people and, the general public, they don't know the breadth of brain conditions that can impact people in Canada. And so giving each of these organizations room to talk about their work and why it's important, but emphasizing that united message that we need to work on this together, and that can only come from federal support, is a very strong message. So what was really amazing was in the report that came out after this, at the end of this study, a lot of the points that we're arguing for came out in this report. So the fact that we need to invest in people and skills, that we need a long-term research funding program to provide stability and flexibility for ambitious research projects, that they need to support and enhance specific moonshot goals. Open science is mentioned, the need to invest in research infrastructure and maintenance of this research infrastructure. And of course, working together with all these other groups and building on our strengths and impacting the social, environmental, and economic good for all Canadians. And on that point, we as researchers are used to making the argument, well, if we have knowledge on the brain now, down the line, we will use that knowledge to find more treatments and cures and prevention of these brain disorders. But that's beyond the election cycle for most politicians. And so we really need to make these other arguments for the economic and social good of Canadians. And that's what we did at this Canadian Science Policy panel that I mentioned before. The other folks that we had was a health economist, one of the top venture capitalists in life sciences in Canada, and the president of the Neurological Sciences Federation, to talk about our impact on healthcare, and to talk about the potential for innovation and why we need to invest in research in our country for us to reap the benefits of innovation, and the health economic arguments in terms of creating jobs, in terms of the talent that we're losing, but also the economic arguments with regards to lost productivity from all of these brain conditions. And then we also had Javeria as our early career researcher. She trained at U of T and then at Harvard and Northwestern, and then came back to Canada and decided to go to Dalhousie, and she loves it there. And so these are the kinds of stories that can make impact with politicians, to know these are all the different arguments that we can make as to why we need to support brain research. The other things that we're doing are more at the global, international level, because these brain initiatives were invested in 2016, and now we've really moved towards even bigger scales of collaboration, and then the need to be able to connect with other countries' brain initiatives as well. And we're realizing that these larger collaborative models are needed. So for example, data sharing is not just within Canada, but with all of these international groups, because many of the brain initiatives actually have funding for data platforms attached to it, and we need to be able to connect and contribute. And so under the organization and guidance of the European Brain Council, they've been bringing together all of these groups to try and make brain health and research a global policy issue. And so, for example, last year with the UN General Assembly, there's always a series of science summits. And it's because even though the UN has these sustainable development goals, and they kind of drive, they're the framework that drives all of the action by the UN states, but they're realizing that most of these require science to make any difference. And so they always have science summits now, and the EBC organized one for brain research and health. And so we were able to take part. And the idea is that we really want to put brain health and research on the global agenda. Because right now, for example, in the World Health Organization, there's a brain health unit, but they're actually a part of a mental health focus that came out many, many years ago. And we really just need to recognize it on its own. So part of the call to action is to get national brain strategies for every member state. So we are doing this. And so, of course, federal government is interested to know what's happening on the global level and to make sure that we are a part of things. And we're working actually right now with Healthy Brain, Healthy Lives, CFREF, to put together a Canadian declaration for brain health and research. So that's some of the things that we're doing. So to kind of pull it back a little bit, we went very large scale. So I want to kind of bring it back to what you can do, and why I'm so grateful that you are all here. So we're really talking about this investment in people, and that means investment in you and your futures. And so it's really important for you to raise your voice and to know that your voice is valued and can make a difference. So that, sorry, excuse me. And speaking from my experience, I know most of us do not have any training in advocacy or understand how decision-making works. And so we want to support you to do that so that you can tell your story from different angles, whether it's translating your work so that a lay person can understand, or just telling your story as a scientist and what drew you to the field, and why are you in Canada, and why are you still here, or why did you come here? And the fact that you can engage your MP, because every single one of you can ask your MP where you live for a meeting. They have to listen to you because you're in their riding. And so, and I don't think most people I certainly didn't realize this until we got here. And it is important, and I'm going to give an example here. So Guy Rouleau testified for that Science and Research Committee's Moonshot study. And he's one of our leaders, and he gave this fantastic story, which they quoted in full in the report. And basically the gist was that he was able to recruit this top researcher from Yale, even though she'd been offered 100 million euros to start her own lab in Germany. She ultimately went to the MNI. And that's because they had the research infrastructure and the collaborative environment. And there's another person too that they who decided to join because they have all the equipment and the colleagues. And this is the kind of thing that, politicians don't know about. They don't know what's important. What they worry about is losing talent and not being able to attract the best talent. And so it's giving stories like this. And I mean, granted, Guy Rouleau, Order of Canada and everything, but all of your stories are important. This is really personal on the level of an institution. It's not because Guy is so important. And so your stories are valuable. And this is why we're holding a workshop during Brain Awareness Week to train and support everyone in their advocacy efforts. So I really hope that you will sign up. We do want researchers at all career stages to take part. And what we'll do, working with Temple Scott Associates, who are a government relations firm who also works with CAN, is to kind of explain a little bit how the government decision-making process works, to help you develop effective communication strategies, to arm you with customizable advocacy materials and resources, and to have a hands-on session with science communicators so you can put together a letter that you can send to your MPs, to anybody really, to advocate. So I really hope that you will sign up. So to summarize, it's time to give Canada the Brain Initiative that we deserve. And we have the leaders of more than 40 now neuroscience and mental health research institutes. We have our Indigenous leaders and patient representatives. We have these diverse stakeholders on board: funders, nonprofits, health charities, other advocacy groups, industry, think tanks, and we've carried out these broad consultations to build this strategy together. What we're working on now is a business case. There's a 100-page template on Treasury Board Canada. So it's a highly technical document, but we're working on that. And in the meantime, what we really need to do is to ramp up our government engagement and get everybody involved. We're working with the organizations in our coalition. Globe and Mail actually approached us with ad space and an editorial feature with so we're going to be in their special feature for Brain Awareness Week, and we also need all of our researchers to stand up and to talk about why it is so important that we support research, to really put a human face to the advocacy that we're carrying out. So I think it's kind of fair to say that, you know, as Nathaniel pointed out, as you all know, you know, the state of research funding in Canada is, let's say, suboptimal and way too far off the radar. But we've never been in a position like this before, where, you know, because of our unique strengths in collaboration and coordination, we're able to bring all of these groups together. Sorry, bring all of these groups together and raise this unified voice. So that was a quick overview of what we're doing and our path and what our future plans look like. And I really hope you'll be involved, and I thank you for your time.